Every season on this podcast, we discuss the secret sauce of camp with a couple of crossover day camp pros who have special insight. Today, we welcome Dave Skolnik from Hampton Day Camp and Scott Leonard from Pocono Springs and ask the philosophical yet practical question, what is the Sleepaway Camp Spirit and what are ways that we can inject it into our day camp programs? This is the Day Camp Pod. Welcome back, everybody, to the virtual home of discussion, stories, and best practices for day camp pros around the world. I'm Andy Pritikin, Director of Liberty Lake in the Philly Burbs of New Jersey.
I'm Sam Thompson from Crystal Lake Park District, Crystal Lake, Illinois.
I'm Tiffany Gratton from Chicago, Illinois, and Milwaukee, Wisconsin, the owner of Purposeful Play.
And today we welcome Dave and Scott for a little insight into what many feel is like the holy grail of day camping, guys. And so the story that I usually use to start off this discussion is that I went to Sleepaway Camp. I never went to day camp. So I understand the Sleepaway Camp vibe. And to me, like, all I do is try to recreate it at my camp. And what I tell my Sleepaway Camp friends, like now Scott's at a Sleepaway Camp now, I say, like, you're running like a Peter Luger's, you're running like a steakhouse. You've got these kids 24/7. You got them trapped up there. Like, they don't have to rush home at the end of the day. You don't have to deal with their parents and all that kind of stuff. Like, we are like Wendy's or maybe like a good diner where they're coming in, they're getting their good camp experience and they're going home. And then they get all messed up in the head and then they come back to us, kind of thing. So, but I do feel like a good day camp finds ways to integrate it in. And there's a lot of people out there who never went to Sleepaway Camp, have no idea what the heck we're talking about, but they're campy people and they're doing it and they don't even realize they're doing it, right? So anyway, I'm going to hand it off to Dave Skolnik first. Dave, why don't you tell us like your minute-long origin story and a little bit about Hampton Day Camp?
Sure. So I grew up on Long Island, New York, where I currently reside. And looking back on it, I was probably a day camp director's worst nightmare because I had the best time every summer, but for absolutely no reason whatsoever, I would change camps every single year. So I'd have a great time at one camp, try a new camp the following year, a different sports camp, and I would hop from camp to camp just to try new things, which of course I think we all know. I was the guy that ruined all of our re-enrollment stats back in the day. So
was it because of you or because of your parents?
You know what? I don't know. I probably didn't have. Those were the days where the kids didn't decide necessarily what camp.
That's what I'm saying.
So it was probably whoever gave the best deal that year would be my guess. But I had a blast until I finally found my summer home at Timberlake Camp, led by the famous Jay and Mindy Jacobs. Beautiful sleepaway camp up in the Catskill Mountains of New York, where I was a camper for a number of years and a counselor for a number of years. Never dreamed or even thought that a career in camping was possible until a couple weeks before graduating from college back in 2001. I had been hired to work in the management training company for a company called Aramark, big uniform and food distribution company. And 2 weeks before graduating from college, got a call from the regional manager that said, Dave, sorry to share this with you, but we've done a little bit of an internal review and the program that you were accepted to has been cut. So before your first day of work, you're somehow out of work. And before even calling my parents, I remember calling my best friend who I was supposed to live with in Manhattan. Their headquarters were just over the bridge in Jersey. And I told him, I said, hey, listen, you've got to find a new roommate. I somehow got fired before my first day. And as the story goes, he called his parents, said, oh, this is a complete mess. His mom was and still is a longtime bookkeeper, accounting member of the TLC team, and over lunch one day just mentioned to Jay Jacobs, hey, remember Dave Skolnik, longtime camper counselor, this is what happened, 2 weeks before graduation, just kind of told the same story that I did. And in very Jay Jacobs fashion said, you know what's his cell phone number? I'm looking for a young guy in the organization. A couple of days later, got a voicemail from Jay inviting me to interview with the TLC family. And as they say, the rest is history. So I spent my first 5 years out of college as a young assistant director at Timberlake, learning as much as I possibly could, while at the same time, we had been going through the site plan and land planning process to build a day camp in the Hamptons, which is the camp where I'm one of the directors, Hampton Country Day Camp. So it kind of all came full circle for me, and happy to be a proud member of the podcast today. So thanks for the invite.
Oh, that's awesome. So yes, if you are hearing that correctly, everybody, Dave runs a day camp in the Hamptons.
That's right. Everybody. Not too many people feel very sorry for me on that front for sure.
Right,
Yeah.
but it does present its own set of unique issues, right? Because it's
Without a
not
doubt.
just a whole bunch of billionaires throwing money at him. It's hard to staff, right? You have site issues, right? Because of it, right? Yeah, so grass is always greener.
Exactly. Yeah, and I'm sure we'll get into it, but you definitely won't hear me complain too much about it. It's an awesome opportunity. We've got an awesome team over there, but yeah, you're definitely right. It's not all roses all the time, for sure.
Yeah. So how many years now has Hampton Day Camp going?
So this will be my 13th summer as one of the directors of Hampton Country Day Camp. We actually built it from scratch, which was an amazing project to be a part of. We took a tennis club which had 18 courts, and for the most part basically bulldozed all those courts. We kept 2, and working very closely with a team of architects and engineers. We literally built a camp from scratch, everything underground, from the septic systems and water systems to buildings and basketball courts and pools. So that took a few years to get done legislatively and construction wise. And then we cut the ribbon for the summer of 2010, where we've been since.
That's awesome. That's awesome. My origin story had a similar thing in that when I graduated with my master's, I had a job all lined up, and the same thing. They basically a week before it was like, sorry, no dice. And actually, that's why I went back for my master's in education and went into being a teacher first.
Yeah,
so it's funny the way life
everything
goes.
happens for a reason, they say.
Yeah,
right?
and it's all about timing too, right? Jay needed somebody, and you just sort of lucked out on that. So.
Exactly.
So what do you think, just to sort of start the ball rolling a little bit before we toss it to Scott a little bit to learn about him, what do you think is the Sleepaway Camp Spirit, like when we allude to that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think if you take a step back, I think you have to replace the word spirit with culture, because I think spirit's really a byproduct of the culture which you create, and there's nothing like a Sleepaway Camp culture. So day camp, it's an uphill battle, right? How do you replicate the relationships that are built 24/7 in Sleepaway Camp? How do you replicate the big family feel, the staff bonding, the team philosophy, the loyalty that's engendered summer to summer? I think all that together, that feeds the spirit. That's what helps make the counselors want to paint their face, or the campers cheer from activity to activity. And I'm sure we'll get into it, but me personally, what I found at Hampton Country Day Camp is that it really does start with a core group of leadership staff, and it trickles down from there. In day camp, I suspect there's a little bit more turnover just based on the age of our staff. And so then you look to who can replicate that culture summer after summer. And it's the people that you can look to your left and look to your right to count on, and that's your leadership staff. And if they're the ones that are on stage on Friday mornings doing the crazy dances that are setting the tone for our full camp rallies, it's hard for their respective teams of lifeguards, counselors, and specialists not to follow suit. So I'm sure we'll get into a little bit of the secret sauce, but I've always concentrated more about the culture which spirit follows, as opposed to concentrating necessarily on the spirit itself.
It's great stuff, Dave. That's great stuff. Yeah. So being a goofball is definitely a big part of it. But, being that you work for the Timberlake Camp Group, right? When you said, it's about the people, you needed to pull out an owl at that point.
That is true. Yes, that would have been appropriate. Yeah.
Yes, because that's the big J. Jacob thing. It's all about the who. And I have an owl in my office that I took with me when I left.
Because he doesn't know you took it, but you took it. I like it. Yeah.
Well, yeah. But it is the most important thing. There's no doubt about it.
Without
all
a
right.
doubt.
So we'll get back to the secret sauce, because you touched on a whole lot of really cool stuff there. So Scott Leonard. All right. Tell us about yourself and your camp.
Sure. So I grew up, I definitely knew I wanted to run camp as one of those kids. Like I want to run a sleepaway camp my first summer at Iroquois Springs, which is the camp I grew up at. But I remember I used to be angry at my parents because they didn't own a sleepaway camp. Right in the late 90s, I thought your parents, all these camps were 3 generations. I thought your parents had to own a camp. and I didn't know you can hustle a little bit and make it happen. So, when I grew up just loving Sleepaway Camp, and the owner of Iroquois Springs, Mark Newfield, was just a really important mentor in my life. And when I was 18, we spoke about camp. He said, this is something I think if you're interested in, I think you'd be really good at. Fast forward, after college, I was applying to med school, going down that track. I didn't love it. I was doing some research and working with a few physicians who said, Scott, if there's anything else you'd rather do, go do it. So I called Mark and said, all right, let's do camp. And he connected me with Sam and Alicia Borek, who owned Woodmont Day Camp. At the time I said, day camp, I'm a Sleepaway Camp guy. I'm gonna run a Sleepaway Camp. And Mark said, go learn the business. There's so many parallels. You're around really good people. So I spent 8 years at Woodmont, always wanting and knowing I wanted to get back into Sleepaway Camp. And then 4 years ago, I took over Pocono Springs. Throw a pandemic in there, and here we are.
Outrageous. So just your initial thoughts about the Sleepaway Camp Spirit. Now, that you've been on both sides, especially as an employee.
Both sides. And it's unique because I came from Sleepaway Camp to a day camp that was run by, at the core, Sleepaway Camp people, Sam and Alicia. So
Right.
a lot of they had already infused so much of the Sleepaway Camp culture into Woodmont, which definitely kind of made the transition easier for me because I felt like I was kind of at a Sleepaway Camp. But now that I'm back in Sleepaway, I think about those quirky, organic moments that no other camp has, right? And these aren't traditions, right? Like many camps do Olympics or color war, and have a breakout, right? Like that's their tradition. So for me, I'm just thinking back to this past summer. Let me set the table here. We had a new aquatics director. So down at the waterfront, he started teaching the kids while they were waiting for boats or water ski how to tie different nautical knots, right? And so we meet as a camp each night and as a community. And he one day ran up to the front of camp and said, Scott, I want to present tomorrow's knot of the day, double butterfly knot, and all these different nautical knots. And let me tell you what took off at Pocono Springs. You have that one moment when you announce the Olympics or color war winner and everyone goes absolutely bananas. We had that moment every night of camp for the full summer. This guy would get down there. He would present tomorrow's knot of the day that you're going to learn. Andy, it felt like you were at the sold out Villanova game, right? In March, game winner. It started with our oldest campers in the back, just screaming, going nuts. I mean, at the core of it, if I run into one of my campers on the Upper East Side or wherever, and I say, hey, knot of the day, I think they would smirk, they would chuckle, and like that's an organic memory that Pocono Springs has that no other camp has, and like that's what makes it so special. So I think to relate that to day camp, I think with day camp we are moving so quick throughout the day, and I think we are so structured. So I think if one of these moments are just starting to happen, like let it go. Like I could have shut that down with this swim director wanting to come up and present knots, but it felt a little.
Or you could have made it a one-time thing.
A one-time thing, and it just like you just kind of felt it. And I think that if that moment presents itself, like lean into it and see what it can develop into.
Yeah, well, I think that's you touched on a very important point there, that a lot of day camps, they sort of run it like it's the military.
Right.
and you're stuck in your thing, and you got to move from here to here, and you got to do this and you got to do that. You can't be late, and all we do is preach that parents are over programming their kids. And then they come to these day camps, and we were joking before we started talking about half-hour periods at a lot of day camps, and you're literally rushing from one thing to the next, And the thing about Sleepaway Camp is that it has that feel that you're not rushed.
Sure.
There is a militaristic grid superimposed on top, but it's not the end of the world if you break it. you know?
Totally.
That I love that because when I try to think about why I have the Sleepaway Spirit, sometimes I can't always think why that's happening. But we had one of those organic moments a few years ago where the kids decided to put on a wedding, and now it's become this huge thing that every year is a tradition, and it was all kid oriented, kid facilitated, and totally. So special events can all of a sudden be made by the kids and become better than you ever thought of making yourself. And so you're right, letting that go, letting that play out. That's a good point. And then Dave, I love that you called it culture, because again, that's another point I hadn't really thought about, was that my core staff have been with me a long time. And it's just the way it is. This is the way we think.
Right.
And that's our culture. And so how did that come about? And, you know, trying to start that off in a new place would be interesting. Definitely.
Yeah, no, that is definitely a challenge. All right, before we go on, I just have to plug one of our sponsors here. CRS, Commercial Recreation Products. I'm guessing that one of you guys has a CRS something at your camp, or have had it, right? What do you got, Scott? You're the Sleepaway Camp guy.
Aqua Playground.
Aqua Playground. So yeah, it's a big investment, right?
Totally.
But it is the kind of thing that, you know, first of all, it looks great on tours, but second of all, the kids love it.
Yeah, I think it's also something you can kind of keep adding to it, and slowly over 3 or 4 years make it an extended capital investment into your program versus all at once.
Right. It's sort of like a water ropes course in many ways, when you say.
Totally. I like that.
Right. So, you know, commercial recreation specialists, the fine purveyors of the best recreation solutions to keep camp going strong. Check out their website at CRS4rec. That's a number 4.com, because CRS is serious about fun. And we love these guys. And Rich Wills, thanks a lot for being a day camp podcast sponsor 4 years running, ladies and gentlemen. All right. So back to the nitty gritty here. So another thing that Scott brought up that I thought was interesting is the older kids. The older kids were pushing it, right? They made that kind of thing happen. And my camp has a lot of older kids. I know TIF's programs have older kids, but a lot of day camps out there are geared towards preschoolers and little kids, right? Especially those Long Island day camps where it's like they hit a certain age and they go to Sleepway Camp kind of thing, right? Mm-hmm. And I think it's more of a challenge for those folks, because my older kids will do goofy stuff like that all the time too. Like a couple of years ago, they decided that like the John Denver song Country Roads was going to be the anthem of the summer in 2018 or whatever, right? And they just sang it nonstop, and it just became this like crazy organic thing like you were talking about, and everybody will always remember that, you know? But that's because they're a bunch of whacked out teenagers and they can do that, you know? So my question for you, Dave, is you're starting this Hampton's Day Camp, right? You know there's going to be a lot of 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds and 7-year-olds, right? So what are you thinking intentionally that you can put into the program to get that vibe that you were talking about, to start creating that culture, regardless of how good your top staff are and all that kind of stuff? You have to put some things in there.
Exactly. So coming from the Sleepaway Camp world, you know, obviously one of the most exciting parts of the summer is the end of the summer, where you have marathon or color war. I know different camps call it different things. Out in the Hamptons, one of the things that does make us a little bit unique running a camp in a seasonal geographic location is that it's a bit transient in its nature. We've got campers who come for 1 week, and we've got campers who come for 10 weeks. We actually run a 10-week program. We include the 2 weeks leading up to Labor Day weekend. And so when we sat down and scratched our heads and, you know, tried to figure out, well, how do we infuse that last week of camp feel into every week? One of the things that we did was that we infused the program. I mean, it's a little bit convenient right now because we're talking about Spirit, but we call it Spirit Day, and it's Hampton Country Day Camp's version of Color War. Every Wednesday is Spirit Day. And so week 2, when we break it, that's our Spirit Day breakout. And Wednesday, week 2, 3, 4, all the way through to the end of the summer, culminating in a 2 to 3 day color war. We have that spirited feel where we provide the structure, we provide the medium by which our returning staff are the generals, and we've got music playing and tug of war, everything that you would otherwise kind of power pack towards the end to have the kids stay and end in a climactic way. We've kind of drip intentionally throughout the summer, So we're not waiting for the last week for the spirit to explode. We've got that cooking week 2. We give everybody a good week plus to get their feet on the ground. You talked about it, the operation. Day camp is a little bit operationally driven. You want to make sure, especially with kids so young, that everything is super organized and accounted for and the program's flowing. But then week 2, once a week throughout the summer, we turn up the juice. And I'll tell you what, that does spark just a great level of enthusiasm that then trickles through Thursday to that following Tuesday. The kids are all split in different teams, half team blue, half yellow. We provide shirts, but on top of that, we provide face paint for the staff and the face sticks for everybody else. We decorate the campus in blue and yellow flags. So it's a bit of a pain to do and then take down on a weekly basis, but the benefit of doing that certainly outweighs the cost and the effort, just because of how excited the kids are on a week-to-week basis. And so that's definitely one nugget that I could share at Hampton Country. And I think a lot of camps should actually think about it. I know different camps do different things, whether it's a mid-season Olympics or something, but to kind of drip that spirit throughout the summer, throughout a structured medium like Spirit Day or Color War.
So smart.
Great success.
It's so smart. And it's a changing with the times thing, right? So back when Dave Skolnik was a kid going to camp, most kids, even though he went to a different camp every year, he probably went 8 weeks. He probably went the whole season to a camp, right? But nowadays, and especially across the rest of the country, once you get out of the Northeast, it's 1 or 2 weeks is like the average that people go to camp generally. To come up and take the concept of Color War, right, which usually is a culminating thing, and put it in intentionally on a week-to-week basis, midweek also, which is great. So God forbid your team loses, you're not going home on Friday and be miserable all weekend. Very smart.
Exactly. And if it rains, it's now Thursday. We send out an email, put your so.
Oh, that is a killer nugget of intel there. Let's talk about the culture a little bit, right? So, because it's something that happens organically, it happens because you're finding good people and all that, but it's also something about the intentionality of it too, and putting in things like what you're talking about there, right? I talked about in prior episodes, I have a bridge, I made it the backward bridge, and you got to walk backwards over it, right? Stole that idea from another camp, but cute little things like that. I am always in awe of a day camp that can get the singing and cheering thing going, because I think that's tough for people who have not first been in that culture to then do it, because you could be running a day camp, right? Dave starts Hampton Day Camp from scratch. If he doesn't bring in a music teacher that understands what the heck he's even talking about, what they did at Timberlake, they're going to be like, what? Like at lunchtime, you start doing that? And then if it's a birthday, you sing this song and all that kind of thing. Like just the basics of doing a birthday song for a kid creates culture.
Yep.
And I wonder if some day camp people out there, they worry about these things being, well, it's too goofy and it's too sort of cliche and all that kind of stuff. But for younger kids, like that's what it is. They grasp onto it.
Of course. Yeah. So, you use the word organic in a good way. And I hate to think that we micromanage our culture down to the nitty gritty, but I do think that intentionality, when it comes to creating your culture within the framework, there might be some organic ideas that come through, but how does it happen? Right. So we went back and same thing, we created this Touchpoint Map. We feel very strongly that it comes from the staff down to the campers. I know you might at Liberty Lake, enjoy leveraging some of the older camper goofiness. We don't have as much of that. We start to phase out around 11 and 12, and even those groups, we have fewer of those than we have at 5 and 6-year-olds. So we feel very strongly that the staff are the ones that are going to drive that season to season. And so on top of having a leadership staff that's super fun and energetic and spirited, even with the new staff, we map this out. And so in our first interview, we do a two-part interview process. In our first interview, our awesome associate director, Jane Olshever, is planting seeds about how important it is to us at Hampton Country Day Camp to be fun, to dance when the music's on, to be goofy. We're looking for that type of personality. And then Doris, my co-director, and I reinforce that in the second follow-up interview. Then you look into orientation, and we're investing just as much time into team building and letting the staff experience the fun that they'll be facilitating in camp. but it's about half and half. There's a lot of learning on the fly. It's tough to replicate exactly what's going to happen on day one until you get in there and do it. And then throughout the summer, providing staff with the opportunities to be on stage doing the fun dance moves or tug of war for points. And then even after camp, you know, one of the things is we actually house a little bit under half of our staff in the Hamptons. Andy, you hit on it. I mean, there's a labor shortage everywhere, but in the Hamptons, where there's only, you know, a finite number of people living locally, and then you have an explosion of businesses all trying to operate simultaneously during the Memorial Day to Labor Day season, we actually have to bring in and house staff. We rent houses for staff, and it's a sizable cost, but it's the only answer for what we do. And so for that group of people, we're running preseason get-togethers that different, and we're shuttling them, investing money to get them from, you know, beach to beach or town to town. And it's not just fun and games. There's a larger goal there to create a unified team group philosophy, piggybacking on what happens at Sleepaway Camp during that organic orientation period. So
right, when they're trapped there for a week. Right.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. You know, Tiff has talked many times about how she gets these cool kids that come into in an urban camp, right, and trying to get them to be goofballs. And it's a tough thing to train.
No, absolutely. So I love that you are able to house them. I think that definitely creates just like that synergy. And when you talk about doing a bunch of teamwork, team building exercises as part of your training, that has been essential for us as a camp that is in the middle of, you know, the urban city. And we're a sports camp. All of our coaches are athletes who think they're way too cool to, you know, sing crazy loud camp songs. And none of them, myself included, went to Sleepaway Camp. So literally it took probably until my 6th year to really even realize that there was a spirit of camp that we needed to be getting towards. So much to your point, we were all about building culture, about awareness and orienting to the outdoors, and looking at varied sports. And really what tipped the scale for us was we started doing our annual trainings with the YMCA. And the YMCA, you know, they've done camps forever. They have sleepaway camps and day camps. And so they were out there singing songs super loud and banging chairs. And at first we probably were all like, what, you know, who are these people and where have they taken us? But over time, it's just like, it absolutely is the magic. It certainly, they say culture eats strategy for breakfast. So we can plan camps all day long and programming and activities and all of that. But when there is lack of unity and lack of just like that overall, just like fun spirit, something's missing. And so legit, we had great programming before we started to implement those things, but it was very much the same, or like, it was like all day gym class / your auntie's house and a birthday party, you know what I mean? So it was like more fun than the kids were used to having, but and just like lots of physical activity off of tablets and technology. But that spirit of camp, like when I discovered it, it became part of my recruiting strategy. I only want people who worked at sleepaway camps before, because they got it and they didn't have to be convinced to do it. And it's so sticky for the little people. And at least in my instance, the older kids needed it, right? Like they grow up too quick. They think they're too cool for everything, but they really secretly like it, you know, so you catch them singing and leading the songs. And so really it just changed the spirit. This is grandiose, but almost of the city, because we have now all these kid athletes who are out here in these NY to LA tournaments and playing basketball and quoting the biggest rappers and all that craziness. And now their camp songs are rap songs, but it's all about camp. And so just amazing when you talk about culture. It absolutely is what differentiates, you know, the camps that really make an impact that last.
Right. That's all. Real quick, by the way. So we started this a few years back. Every spring around May, we send our full staff an email, and all the subject line is, "This is what your summer job will look like," and it's just 2 pictures. And on the top is, "This is what you get to do," and it's a picture from the previous summer from a spirit day where the staff is all dressed up and painted and flexing their muscles and they're in their capes. And then below it, "This is what your friends have to do in the office," and it's a guy and a girl with their head on their desk punching a computer. And it's just a very subtle reminder of the opportunity that they have where, hey, this is what you get to do this summer, and this is what it should look like. And when you kind of piece that together with the other touch points that we have going on, I think you go into the summer saying, okay, the culture has been introduced. Now it's time to execute it. So, just another small idea that we do.
Yeah, I love that too. There's the real job campaign that ACA does. And I think that when you use the language like this is what you get to do, especially as people have like turnover and shortages and all of that this summer, to have a summer job where you just like play is your work, like no, but you get to do this. You don't have to do this, even though the days can get long and, you know, burnout can happen. It's still, it beats flipping burgers, you know, by any means, the breadth of experience that you get by being in this community, and you're merging your income with your impact and having fun.
Yep.
So I really
like
love that. I really
Yep.
love that.
Tiff is good at those.
Andy said
I
that.
like
She's
that.
good at those.
Andy
You
said,
trademark that?
I should. Andy
Get that in the
said,
notes.
day camps are the Wendy's. I'm Chick-fil-A. I just want to.
All right. Yeah, it's fun. It's totally cool.
One thing with the singing that you guys were talking about, if you find a nearby camp that wants to do it like a half training day with you, and you have a singing and games competition between the two camps, then, you know, everybody sings certain songs a little bit differently. Then the whole day ends up really fun, and everybody, you know, comes away thinking it's cool. So I like how you modeled during your training the behavior you wanted to see when they had the kids.
Yeah, I mean, that's the challenge here, is jumpstarting those people who have not had that experience, right? Because most people, especially when you hire teachers, they're coming from a school mentality, and the school mentality is pretty rigid. You know, I mean, yeah, there are some schools that are more fun than others based on the principle, you know, oh, we get dressed up on these days and stuff like that, but it is still relatively rigid. A couple little shortcuts. What I saw it was a camp application at Banner Day Camp in Chicago. They have on their application the simple question, do you sing? Right? Very simple. And then they would take those people during orientation and teach them songs, like the camp songs.
Great
so
idea.
that when they have assemblies, these people would stand up and be in the aisles and be the song leaders, getting everybody to do it, right? Super intentional and smart. And the assembly thing is something, you know, that's like a 101 thing. And, you know, you two, you know, Dave and Scott, like you guys went to Sleepaway Camp to you. Yeah, of course you bring everybody together in that assembly. Like, it's like no brainer. But for a lot of camps that are like schools don't bring everybody together very often. It's sort of like a pain in the neck, and it could be crazy, right? But for a camp to have everybody together, whether it's the beginning of the day, the end of the day, once a week, whatever the heck it is a very cathartic feeling to have that feeling and have, you know, whether it's dozens of people or hundreds of people or whatever it is, singing a song together, like that does something. I mean, look, why is religion successful? Because it happens in churches and synagogues and stuff like that, right? I mean, it is a feel to it. It is a religious experience in many ways, right? And that's one of the things I brought to North Shore Day Camp when I was there, was the Friday assembly and getting everybody together at the end of the day, because it's like a no-brainer.
Yep. Well, we copied you out in the Hamptons then, because if you brought it to North Shore, a lot of our success was stolen from our sister camp North Shore. So thank you, Andy, in the in the chain rule.
No worries, a pleasure.
You know, one thing that's funny is that I just lost my train of thought. Let's get me. I'll come back.
No worries. So Scott, now that you've gone back to where your heart is at Sleepaway Camp, right? If all of a sudden we had to throw you at a day camp right now, right? And that had no like traditions and all that kind of things, like what are sort of the 101 kind of things you would throw in there that you make sure happen?
Yeah, I think, you know, when we talk about the opportunity to gather together and community and assembly, I think what's so cool about Sleepaway Camp is, right, you're going through life making decisions without your parents there. So, and those are pretty powerful moments. So when can you replicate that in day camp? So I think, you know, in terms of electives, right? You think of some day camps offer elective programming. When you dive deeper into that, don't send the electives home for parents to fill out, right? Let the campers make those choices. At Woodmont, campers love to be able to, even if they were 5 years old, to waddle up to the salad bar and pick out their own items to make a salad, right? Like those were special moments of just campers making their own decisions. And I think the more you totally, and I think a lot of like that's Sleepaway Camp. I have one more that I was saving for the tip of the week.
Go for it. Go for it.
Are we there now?
Well, actually, you know what, Tiff, do you have one more thing to say? I know you got another meeting to go to.
Yeah. I'll gain my thought back. For our listeners, I really wanted to say, like take notes. If you're new to camp, or if there's someone who's listening who works at camp and is thinking about opening day camp, like really take notes, because I remember getting something from the YMCA, like their agenda, right? I'm a totally accidental camp director. And it was like opening ceremony and ending ceremony. And I was like, what is that? Like, what does it mean? And all it really meant was gather, like assembly, just like what Andy was just saying. So when he said that, just like literally the stuff they're sharing is gold. It changes everything. I have friends who I try to convince, like if you're doing photography, or if you're doing whatever your niche is, you want to do that work with children, you can totally turn that into a day camp experience, especially in the urban communities, because kids don't get to have those unique opportunities. And so for anyone who's listening, who's doing something like that, turning your unique niche into something that is youth serving, listen to what these guys are saying, take notes, it's gold, and you can implement these things no matter what you're doing. We were doing sports and we're singing about pepperoni pizza with a whole lot of cheese, and they sang the songs, you know what I mean? So just do it. But yes, I have to run, so sorry to ditch you guys early, but thank you so much for sharing all of the gems.
Thanks. You're always inspiring, Tiff.
Hi, Tiffany.
And as she said, everything is campable. Like everything is adaptable, right?
Sure.
Just because what, Scott's talking about, he's doing it on a 600-acre lake in the mountains doesn't mean you can't do it in, at Tiff's, basically a building. She's doing it in a building in the city, it's surrounded by asphalt.
Yeah. And nothing we spoke about today really had to do with facility. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I love that. All right. So before we get back to Scott's last tip there, all right, I just want to give a shout out to our new sponsor, Camptivities, which, funny enough, Scott is a new client of Camptivities, because as the Camptivities folks will tell you, what better time to switch than in a pandemic when everything is up in the air, and it'll give you alternatives, right? It'll give you things you can sort of flip into and help your creativity. And what I've found just in my talks with Camptivities is that very similar to when I switched to CampMinder, that when you go in and work with a company that has a bunch of other really good clients, you inevitably are going to learn from them the same way you learn from the podcast, right? Because they'll say, well, this is the way a lot of people do it. Why don't you try it like this? And I'm like, damn, I've been doing this for 20 years. I never even thought of doing it like that, So it's sort of like a silver lining of working with one of these kind of organizations. What do you say? So anyway, Camptivities, folks. Go ahead.
Just one piece on Camptivities, especially kind of navigating through programming through a pandemic, which it seemed like when you're potting and quarantining and all of that, every week is a different schedule. I definitely think we'll have our program director for the next 25 years after giving them this really incredible tool. So.
Awesome. So check out Camptivities at camptivities.com, specifically designed for camps by camp people, right? And they're really good people. I know them pretty well. All right, Scott, take us home.
Tip of the week. So this is what I wished we did at day camp. So at Sleepaway, in terms of food service, so for breakfast and dinner at Pocono Springs, we serve family style. So the kids get their table that they sit at with their counselors, and that's where they eat. Lunch is a bit different. It's open format. So campers grab their food off the buffet line. They can eat at any table inside the cafeteria. They can eat on the porch. They can go picnic down by the lake. So this is an opportunity where they can go eat with siblings, right? They can eat with friends from other cabins, older, younger, their camp big brother, big sister. Maybe they're really connected with that tennis instructor, right? So it's this open format type setting. And I think what I'm most proud of, just in terms of the culture we've built at Pocono Springs thus far, when I stand on that dining hall porch, every camper walks out with their food and it's gobbled up. by other campers, staff. It's not that cafeteria setting feel where campers kind of looking for someone to eat with. And that's how I know we're up to something really special with our culture. And I think that's the litmus test, right? Like if that starts slipping and we see kids starting to wander, whether it's in summer 2022 or 2028, that's where we have to kind of dive in and look at what we're really doing. So I'm sensitive to day camp. I know how that food service goes. I know how quick it is. But maybe there is an opportunity where you can take multiple age groups and let them eat with multiple different specialists in kind of a picnic setting. Because I think, again, that kind of really helps build that community.
It's interesting. Shout out to my friends at Wingate Kirkland Camp on Cape Cod, Will Rubenstein. When I visited his camp, they do that at his Sleepaway Camp too. Yeah. And at first, from a day camp guy, I was like, ooh, it's weird. Oh, it hurts. Like, how do you do that? And he's like, I'm telling you, man, it's awesome. Just gave the same examples that Scott was giving. And I think that that's one of the Sleepaway Camp Spirit things is pushing the envelope a little bit. I think going back to that, like, camp is not school. Okay. I think that school is very restrictive and everybody's always worried about doing something different. And the parents are going to get upset and blah, 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 and all that kind of thing. Right. And that was a big deal when I was a young guy working at my first camps. The older camp directors would always be like, oh, we don't want Mrs. Wiedemeyer to get all upset about this, kind of like that was like the knee jerk reaction about everything. Whereas when you're at Sleepaway Camp, nobody knows what the hell's going on. You could bury a kid for 3 days and nobody would even find out probably. Yeah. But pushing it a little bit, because I do think, especially with today's young parents that are in their late 30s, early 40s, they're up for some excitement, and they're down with it. This is the generation now. They want their kids to scrape their knees. They want their kids to experience some hardships, a little bit of an anxiety. Like it's good. They don't want their kid growing up and being a wuss when they're in their 20s and living at home until, whatever. So I do challenge the listeners out there to push it a little bit, because that's one of the things that sleepaway camps would do. Hey, let's just try to see here, grab your lunch and eat wherever you want. Yeah. Right now, what could happen at a day camp? Like nobody's getting kidnapped, no kid is going to get traumatized from that too bad. And if they get a little upset, well, whatever, it won't tomorrow, but that's that to me. I mean, what do you think about that, Dave?
I love how you used the words too bad. They won't be traumatized too badly.
Wait, a little bit of trauma. It's like, it's not the worst.
Yeah, that is funny. What do I think? I think if you could do it in a way like Scott had mentioned, where it's perhaps not the entire camp, but specific groups in a structured way for them to interact with different personalities around camp, I think it's an awesome idea. I think it's definitely.
I mean, but it goes back, like if Dave went to some big established day camp, it's been around for 70 years, and said, hey, every Wednesday, let's do a color war. They'd be like, dude, you're smoking crack. Like, that's insane. Like, you know what I mean? Right. Like people, I think day camp people's first reaction is to sort of push back and talk about what could go wrong. And maybe it's just a human reaction overall. But I think when you're taking care of young kids with nervous parents, you become paranoid about that.
Yep. Yeah. Right? You're always very worried about what you can control, that anything that perhaps is outside of those parameters does elicit just a crazy amount of anxiety, where your natural reaction, like you said, is probably like, maybe next summer, Yeah.
And Andy, go ahead. Yeah, Andy, I'm a fan of the podcast. One of my favorite moments is when you were talking about something about baseball. And you're like, the kids are just going to take bats and just start hitting each other. Like, no. You set rules.
Well, that was the free choice thing. The people that were resistant to just having free play.
Right. So I think don't they kill each other? Yeah, I think about that when you set some rules, like where you can sit, where you can't go back to your bunk. The area better be cleaned up. If not, we're not doing this again. You're going back at your tables. So, but yes, I'm sensitive to the challenges at day camp. But if you can pull it off, it might be special.
Yeah, it helps to have someone on staff that's pushing it. That's pushing it a little bit. That has that kind of creativity that can push you a little. So I have this woman, Brandy, who's been with me for years. She's been on the podcast, and last year we were supposed to do we usually do a giant slide on this hill, but for whatever reasons we couldn't do it there. And she was like, oh, that's no problem. We could do it over here. And I'm like, well, where are they going to land? Because they usually go into the lake. And she's like, well, just dig a big hole. and then run a hose, and we'll fill it up with water and they'll land into that. And I was like, that sounds terrifyingly dangerous, you know? And she was like, you know, trust me. And they built a big hole and kids used it all summer. In a year that it was the hottest summer of all time, we had this slide that all we needed was running water in a hose. And these kids were going down a hill and landing literally in a mud pit, I mean, basically full of water. And these kids were, you know, soaked to the bone, went home in soaking wet, muddy sneakers, which, by the way, 20 years ago, Sam, you could relate to this. 20, 25 years ago, the parents would have been like, you ruined my kid's sneakers, that kind of thing. And I'm telling you, today, they're just like, that's awesome. You know, like I literally sent an email out. I said, bring a towel when you pick your kid up, you know, because you're going to want to put it on the seat of your car because they're going to be completely covered in mud. And the parents are like, that's why I sent my kid to camp.
My guess is that in your postseason questionnaire, that activity was probably ranked 1 or 2 as their favorite activities, and you got it done.
I don't know.
Awesome.
This was the summer of insanity. I think it might have been when the camp flooded. That might have been the number one event.
Then you had a free mud pit. Then you didn't have to put a hose down.
Oh, God, no, nobody was allowed. That's drew the line there. Didn't want them being swept into the Delaware River.
Yeah.
All right, folks. I want to thank Dave Skolnik and Scott Leonard for joining us. Sam and Tiff, if you like what you hear, subscribe to the Day Camp Pod on your favorite podcast platform. Thanks to Matt from the Go Camp Pro team and AM Skyer and Commercial Recreation Specialist for helping us bring this. Oh, what am I saying? Camptivities. Camptivities, our new podcast sponsor. Check out the show notes from this and other episodes at daycamppodcast.com, as well as contact from everybody that'll be on this, that's on the show today. Thanks for listening and make yourself a better camp professional. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Day Camp Pod.